what was it like for you when you first came to that conviction that the advice I'm getting from my church is not good advice? What were the tells of that? And then, what then did you do about it, and what kind of pushback did you get?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it didn't really occur to me that the advice was bad. Um, but I had some kind of, disastrous dating experience and we'll go all that. And it's like, well, this was bad. And again, I think what happens, and I see this happen a lot with Christian men, is, they have some disastrous relationship or their wife divorces them or something of that nature happens. And the very first thing they do is they start blaming themselves. If, only I had been more of a servant leader, this would not have happened. And I think when we go looking for fault with ourselves, we almost always find it because we tend to do, we're human beings. And so it's like, wow, what are all the things I did wrong? Well, I can make a really long list of that. And you make the point that it's the long list. And that long list might be completely accurate, but it might also be completely wrong in a greater scheme of things. And so, this none of this teaching on gender, when I put it into practice, had produced good results. And I probably was inclined to blame myself because I could say, here's like horrible things or whatever that I've done. And then again, you see, then you encounter, maybe your average manosphere person who says, actually, this is the way relationships work. And if you're tempted enough to put that into practice and you discover that indeed it does work, then, like, wow, like what's going on there? And that's why I think, I really think the gender stuff online is the most important lever for changing people's point of views in a number of directions, because our relationships with the opposite sex are primal. And if someone tells you how you can become more successful with women and you're a guy, you're the so-called average frustrated chump, and you consider yourself lucky if a woman actually looks at you and will, respond to your, emails or will any of that stuff. And then somebody says, actually, what you have to understand is that women are looking for men that are higher status for themselves. And so rather than getting on your knees and giving them a dozen roses and treating them to fancy dinners, what you need to be doing is doing everything to establish a frame and a point of view which sees you as the catch, that she sees you as like the star athlete that she's desperate to be with. And you're actually like telegraphing exactly the wrong message when you do things like, here, let me like buy you expensive dinners. When you're in this aggressive suitor mode, you're constantly telegraphing that you're lower status than her. And women actually want to marry up. They want to date up. Now, of course, many of these guys who are saying this stuff are actually all about like pickup artistry. So they're in the service of that. But you can think about that. And you're like, oh, that makes sense. And then if you actually apply it and it works, and, which it does, to be quite honest. I mean, within 30 days, if you're like an average frustrated chump guy, just by applying some basic, readily available online, ideas about how to attract women, you can very easily improve your dating results literally by 10x. And so when you can have 10x improvement in a day, and then once that happens, you're going to believe anything else those people tell you because you think they're prophets. And, that is a big part of it. And it's the sort of thing you can't fake. And that's why the other thing is it's primal. It's the sort of thing you can't fake. So if somebody puts up a post that talks about structural racism in the United States and says, we have this problem with structural racism. And, we had redlining and we had blockbusting and we had, urban renewal and all this stuff and on. And then somebody else says, well, no, we don't have structural racism. And here's why. This is critical race theories. You can listen to these things, just like you can listen to debates on trade policy or many other things. But there's no way to really objectively verify who's telling you the truth. Because in any of these things, it's like, well, you got to have 25 different controls in order to, make sure that you got the right, use the right measure of inflation and all this stuff. So it's purely kind of like tribal. They're articles of faith in a sense. But when it comes to meeting someone, of the opposite sex, you can try this stuff for yourself and like put it into practice and see, does it work or does it not work? The same thing is true of fitness and diet advice. Does it work or does it not work? Although I think with it's even less the case. A lot of these guys, online influencers, are very in the fitness space as well, and like all the food and other stuff. And really, the truth is, if you do nothing and then all of a sudden you're doing any sort of workout, it's gonna seem like it's transformational. So it's like there's a lot of things you can do, and there's a lot of placebo effects with a lot of changes you make like that. But there's no faking, you know, being in a coffee shop or a bar or any public setting and being able to initiate a conversation with a woman and have her respond positively. She's either going to respond positively or she's going to respond in some other way. You can't fake it. And you can prove it to yourself. And it's in something that's primal. And so I think when you see that, it's a fact of the universe that you can anchor to in a way that you can't anchor on to any of this other stuff. Even the Taleb stuff, it's like, well, is that really true? Or is this just some random thing that made it seem like what he was saying was true to, kind of get meta there? It's like, there's so much stuff you can't say, but like, and you could even chalk it up. I got one date with one woman. Well, now when it happens for the fifth time, it's like, actually, this works. And so I think that is really, it's really the master switch in terms of causing people to rethink anything and opening them to rethinking the world. Is refactoring their things, their thinking on gender. And so I see this all the time. I see people in churches who are single and unhappily single, male or female. And I say, I don't actually say it because I don't give people unsolicited advice, but I can just see that like these people are clearly going in the wrong direction. Everything they're doing is counterproductive to the goals that they're setting. And so there's a lot of stuff like that I think is very, very clear. And then, of course, the other thing that you learn, if you do any sort of reading, is all the facts they're not giving you in church. So, oh, by the way, women initiate about 70% of all divorces. It's one of the most well-established statistics in social science. You will never hear a pastor say that in a sermon on, you'll never hear it in one of their marriage books. I read Tim Keller's marriage book the first time. It was one of these things they gave me. I'm like, oh man, this is so amazing. I need to put this into practice. Then I read it with a critical lens and I'm like, this thing's full of more holes than Swiss cheese. And like, the book's full of stats. And of course, they don't give you that stat. And so many of the ways that they frame it and so many of the ways that they talk about different things, I was like, well, you can just see how you're kind of being like misled here, manipulated there. And so you realize like these guys are not really giving you the straight dope at the end of the day. Not to say that they're deliberately, misleading you. I think, most of these people, I think, are just repeating what they've heard everybody else say from like the big name. But you can believe the biggest name people in the evangelical world, 100% have heard the Minority Report. Okay. It's not like they're reading some blog post of mine and this is the first time they've ever heard that women are not attracted to servant leadership. They know, believe me, 100%. Because, I sometimes I come across some of these people who've called them out on it, and I know they know who these people are. And but the average person, the average pastor is just repeating what he's heard. And so I think basically, you see these things, and you're like, yeah, why are men turning to Jordan Peterson? What I find is just how little curiosity the average person in the religious world, how little curiosity they have about why people turn to Jordan Peterson.